Welcome to the September edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, your host, and on this show we're reviewing 3 films currently out in cinemas or streaming on your TVs. First, we review Coralie Forjat's The Substance, coming off a very successful festival run at Cannes, Edinburgh International Film Festival, and Toronto, and starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. Then we review Jeremy Saulnier's Netflix crime action thriller, Rebel Ridge, and finally we review Lee, directed by Ellen Karas, starring Kate Winslet. I sit down with Marian Oshaga, director and curator of the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival, which is having its 11th edition this year in October. And finally, I also sit down with the curators Harriet and Iliad of the Samizdat Eastern European Film Festival, which runs from the 1st to 5th of October in Glasgow. All in this show, so stay tuned. So Cinetopia has quite a lot of events coming up this month. First, our monthly networking event is happening tonight if you're listening to our show on show day. So come by the Blackbird Bar. We'll be back in the courtyard as we usually are from 7 to 10 p.m. For film screenings, we have not just one, but 2 documentaries we're screening at the Cameo this month. The first one is our Dot Club installment for October, War Game, and it's not about the 80s Matthew Broderick film. It's about an elaborate simulation that escalates the threat posed by the January 6, 2021 insurrection. The film follows a bipartisan group of U.S. defense, intelligence, and elected policymakers spanning 5 presidential administrations as they participate in an unscripted role-play exercise. If you liked Alex Garland's Civil War, I think you'll really like this documentary as well. That's happening mid-October, date to be announced, but check out our website soon for tickets and timing info. Finally, in collaboration with Shortcom Film Festival, we are screening the Edinburgh premiere of local filmmaker Duncan Cowell's film Silent Men. The film won a special mention for first feature film at Sheffield Docfest this year, and I sat down with Duncan to talk about his film earlier this year on our Sheffield Docfest special. The film is both funny and poignant, and I think you'll really like it. So join us on the 23rd of October at 8:15. The film will be followed by a Q&A with Duncan, moderated by documentary film producer Sonia Henrici. Also, check out Shortcom's whole program happening in early October, which is on their website, shortcom.org. So much happening this upcoming month, so I hope you'll check out all that's on offer within our local film community. All right, and welcome to our September edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm here with regular Gary and a new person, Robert Ewing. Gary and Robert, how are you doing? Gary, how's your September going film-wise?
Good, yeah. I've just been, I think, off the back of doing Edinburgh Festival, I've probably not seen as many films in September as I saw in August. And other things have just been getting in the way of my film viewing, but I've managed to get a few cinema trips under my belt. And feels like we're creeping towards the beginning of award season, so I'm interested for some of these awards movies coming out. But yeah, excited to talk about the ones that are on the agenda today.
Yeah, it's award season and festival season here in like the UK and Scotland, so it's lots and lots of festivals. We'll be talking to 2 of them later on in the show. But Robert, you just came from a big festival, so you just came from Toronto. You also were reviewing the Edinburgh Film Festival. That's how we met. But tell us a little bit about your work and what kind of films you like to review and whatnot.
Yes, to give a brief overview of like how I started. So I started doing reviews for a local magazine in kind of like the West Lothian area back in 2019 called the Connect magazine. So I started with them. I kind of just reviewed. They're very lenient at what I can talk about. So I review old stuff, new stuff, anything from all over the world, documentaries, it's whatever I kind of want to talk about. And then in late 2023, I started to write for the People's Movies, which is started off, it's mainly a Scottish-based one, but there's people write from kind of, I don't want to say all over the world, but there's people I think some Americans write for it, some Australians, but it's mainly a UK-based online outlet. And with them, I mainly prioritize doing anime reviews in Asian cinema. That's kind of like my go-to with them. But when festivals come in, I kind of help out and cover anything and that leads into when I went over to TIFF. I was the only one from them to do TIFF for them, which was a surreal experience. It's probably one of the best film festivals I've ever been to in my entire life, and it's I think unlike anything that I've done before. It's because I was meeting up with people there. It's like, because like when you speak to people from who are mainly Toronto based, like, oh, how was London and stuff, and it's like the key thing that I found is like this feels like an actual festival. It kind of feels like how the Fringe is, where like they'll close off the street for the first week, and it's like the street is just TIFF, and it's like, and there's red carpets happening. It feels like every hour there's a red carpet happening. They just kind of chuck them out. There's like, I believe there's usually like, especially at the beginning of the festival, there could be like 10 red carpets in one day, and they go through them all, and it's so lively. Like all the people standing around waiting to get pictures. Like when I came down for a screening, there was people like screaming because Jacob Elordi showed up, and they're like, everyone was freaking out to see him. But it felt like how, I think for us, like how the Fringe feels, where it kind of just takes over that part of the city, and it genuinely feels like a lively festival experience. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, no, that's great to hear. And well, we had a little excitement over Jacob Elordi as well, because he came to Edinburgh last week, or it was the week before or something like that. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein was filming on the High Street, so I thought it was interesting that Jacob Elordi was at TIFF, and then the next day was like, in like costumes and like at the well, we do a lot of events at the French Institute, and I was there and watching, so I was just observing as one of those passerbys. Also, always good to plug your work, Gary, again. So Gary, you have your own website, right, where you do reviews, and do you sort of do you mostly just review everything, or do you have certain ones that you'd like to review as well?
That's kind of dictated by how busy I am with other stuff with my day job. So there's always spikes when I cover Glasgow Film Festival and then Edinburgh and then any other film festivals that I do. So they're the kind of main points. And then aside from that, I kind of lean towards indie films more than, like, you'll rarely see any reviews of Marvel stuff or big blockbusters on my site now and again. But the site's cinema perspective. And I'm hoping to, it's funny you were mentioning about TIFF, because I'm been wanting to branch out and do more festivals, and I think I'm going to book flights for Berlin for February. I'm going to do that, so that'll be the next.
Well, Gary, let's talk, because I booked my flights to Berlin for as well, and so I think Berlin, as you said, Robert, with TIFF, is one of my favorite film festivals. It's got a nice mixture between being an audience festival, where it's sort of, you can buy a ticket and, it's part of the city and it's the landscape of the city and the cinemas, but also the red carpet is, in a certain place as well. So it's a fun, it just also happens to be around my birthday. So it's one of my favorite excuses to bring, to celebrate my favorite thing, which is film, around that time. Freezing cold though as well. But yeah, so maybe we'll all be in Berlin, this year. Well, thank you both for joining, and we're going to be reviewing 3 films today. And we'll start with the first one, which is basically what, I don't know, everyone's kind of talking about that I know of. It's called The Substance. It was at Cannes originally. It won Best Screenplay.
People always ask for something new. It's inevitable. At 50, well, it stops.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect. One single injection unlocks your DNA and will release another version of yourself. This is The Substance.
I'm Sue.
You're hired.
Robert, tell us what this film is about and a little bit of an overview of this film.
Yeah, so kind of The Substance is directed, I believe, by French filmmaker, is it Carly Faret?
Carly Fraser, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of her follow-up to Revenge. I don't know if you've seen that. But it's kind of like this successor to that. And it kind of follows Elizabeth Sparkle, that's played by Demi Moore, who is she's an actress kind of past her prime, as like they say in the movie. Because you have the slimy producer called Harvey, played by Dennis Quaid, and he wants somebody that's younger and than Demi Moore. And then as the course of the film goes, she's kind of given a way to make herself younger, as they say, with a thing called The Substance. It's a black market drug, and basically it says that it can make a younger, better version of herself. And then she decides to take the substance, and then we see that as the film goes on, that she gets a better version of her, played by Margaret Qualley, and who becomes the next big thing in to this producer played by Dennis Quaid's life, and then it's kind of taken the world by storm.
Then the film really does take a absolutely crazy, wild ride and tour, and we won't give everything away, but let's just say genre is like part science fiction, but a lot body horror and a lot grindhouse sort of. But yeah. So Gary, thoughts on this film?
Yeah, I think it's been a divisive film. I think I've seen like people absolutely loving it, and I've seen the opposite opinions as well. I'm somewhere in the middle on it, and I think I can appreciate, like, I love how it's very, like, it's an uncomfortable movie to sit through, obviously deliberately, and it's this like disgusting body horror, feels very visceral, very tactile, and I think the performances are really great. I think once it establishes its themes and its story, maybe the first half hour or so, and I was into it. I was sign me up. But then for me anyway, it just feels like it kind of like hammers its own idea kind of into the ground for the next hour and a half. And I don't know if it really like has much more to say once you get past the surface of, obviously it's commenting on body image and the way that Hollywood treat women and ageism. And I think technically it's amazing to doing that. And the sound design was incredible. But I don't know whether it needed to be almost 2.5 hours. Yeah, it's definitely an experience. Reminded me a little bit of like Requiem for a Dream, or even like some of the Julia Ducournau's more recent another French female director, where it's just like you're flinching in your seat watching it because it's some of those scenes are so well done. Well, I'm interested to see what your take was on it, Amanda.
So firstly, I just have to say I am not a body horror. In fact, I don't think I've ever gone to a horror film in the cinema. So I decided to get myself ready and go. And I brought a friend with me, and I thought I would probably have my head buried in the seat next to me the whole time. And I did for half of it. But I have to say it is my favorite horror film I've ever seen, because I don't see many, but I do. But I also really loved this film. I mean, it blew me away. I mean, I near about had like a heart attack, through the horror, like at the end. I mean, the last part, like I guess they would say the third act or the last part of the film is just absolutely wild. It's just it's a wild ride. It's absolutely nuts. But it's, to me, the concept of the idea while it kept going was so appropriate. And I think that's partially because, it sort of resonates with anyone who's gone through any sort of sense of body shaming, or, aging or anything, it's not, it is very obviously like a response to the female, the male gaze, and how women feel after that sort of constant sort of, pushing of commercialism and beauty stuff at you and whatnot. but that just complete pounding of the idea just really does fit. It fits and it works, and it makes, like, to take that into a horror and sort of a psychological thriller it just works so well. But I would also just say, from the first shot, like, I loved this first shot. I loved the way at the very beginning, the exposition of who this character was. So Demi Moore was, this Oscar-winning actor, and not, as you said, Robert, and not in her prime now, but in the first minute and a half, you sort of see her the star on the Hollywood star, and like, or maybe it's 30 seconds, you get her life, has sort of gone through decades just by watching the star and sort of how it's cracked. So I think visually, like, it's just absolutely amazing, and I can go into a little bit more details about that, but how the camera shoots the younger version, the new Margaret Qualley versus the Demi Moore, like, and how it sort of manipulates you in talking about ageism and ugliness and this idea of like hagsploitation and stuff. It's just really, I mean, incredible use of the horror genre and those sort of tropes that you get by bringing this into a subject which is so incredibly important, and it makes you think so much. I mean, about the way you as anyone, as a human being, sort of treats yourself, looks at yourself. So I just absolutely was freaked out and loved it at the same time. So I'm still thinking about it, and I'm just breathing a little bit easier after after 24 hours of seeing it. Robert, what did you think?
So I feel like I'm different from both of you because I didn't like this movie. I'm not a big horror person because I found the pounding of the themes to get kind of annoying, especially because I wasn't fully on board with it at the beginning, and it kept pounding these ideas. And there was a point where I understood it and I wanted to do something more. And there's like a certain moment later on with to be vague, with a character called Fred, where it starts to tease something to do something interesting and explore more of the theme. And it just keeps doing the same thing again. And like, for some people, I think if you're fully on board, I think you'll enjoy that scene. But for me, I was just kind of like, I got what you're going for, and it just became kind of repetitive. The body horror scenes are horrific, and but what I found to be more horrifying is, ironically, Dennis Quaid's character.
Yeah,
I found that he is more scary than anything in this, anything like
yes.
they see. It's, I don't know how much you know, but like, he sounded like identical to like Vince McMahon from the WWE, and that's how like, it's just like quite funny how accurately he sounded. And I loved the sound design with his shoes, kind of like he was like big iron, like big clumping around. It was really and like that scene with the prawns is gross. Like it's but that stuff I found scary. And then there's like moments where it's like, I don't know if she's just like, the director was like, she beats his ideas down to like, there's a scene where like we meet a character and it tells you 4 times who this character is, to be like vague about who it is. It shows you clearly something that they established earlier on in the movie, then a flashback, then a scar, and then something else. Like, we get who this character is by showing like the birthmark on the wrist. We know who this is, and like that kind of annoyed me. But like at the end of the day, I did appreciate the film, especially the third act. It's horrific, but also I bet you it was a blast to film. It looks like it was a good time, and I always say everything just because I don't like it. I'm glad that people do like this movie, and it's not every person was for me. So I'm glad that it's kind of found its audience, especially because it's really weird. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. So I'm glad that it's getting a big cinema push and getting the big release, because this could have easily just been dumped somewhere and forgotten about. So it's glad that it's getting to go into theaters, and people are gonna, especially in that third act, I think, gonna have a really good time with it.
I will just say, kind of touching upon what you said about the film definitely takes big swings, and I think like I love cinema that does that, whether like it kind of knows that it's going to divide audiences a little bit. And even though this film wasn't entirely for me, I do think that you have to applaud these directors that take these big swings. It's similar, it may be a weird comparison, but like with M. Night Shyamalan, or a filmmaker like that, where he's making the film that he's going to make, and it's very him, and people sit either side of the fence on it. But this film definitely takes it's bold and it's daring, and it's definitely a unique experience to experience it in the cinema.
Yeah.
I think there's a great amount of references to, like I said, like previous sort of films that you would like. We picked American Beauty out. We picked, The Shining. We picked like different sort of references to other horror films or whatnot. But I also you mentioned the sound design. I think the sound design is really like the drone of a like soundtrack, and the like just the noises and the squishy noises and stuff like that. It's so visceral, and it's so good, and it's so interesting, and it's freaky, obviously, at the same time. But that with a mixture of this like absolutely stunning. So for me, it was just a stunning film. I loved that yellow coat, but I loved just every like, and I also love. There were, there were these shots that were very, I mean, they were very like, again, this male gaze of pushing this sort of thing that it reminded me a little bit about the Swedish filmmaker who made, I think it was called Pleasure, that was about the porn industry and sort of this, sort of gaze on how, women are filmed and women, are looked at. And so I think that just complete repetitiveness of that was just really like hitting you with this a lot. But that's how you, again, if you're dealing with a sense of like shame and like body dysmorphia and stuff, this is sort of the kind of psychological thing that's going to keep hitting you like this. And I think that's actually what was the intention. And the other thing I would just say is that the choice of Demi Moore is such a perfect person, because again, the sort of postmodernness of Demi Moore, who was the sex symbol and who has also reinvented herself in so many different ways. And for her to choose to do this film and to, I heard her do a couple interviews, and she just didn't know, when she read the script, didn't know which way it was going to go. And then she said it could have gone really bad or could have gone really, really well. Well, I think the director showed that she can really make a great film. I mean, again, if it's maybe not your cup of tea, but it was, a really effective film in a lot of ways. And I think between that and the fact that, Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, they're not speaking much. It's a lot about them being alone and having these sort of in the same way that Spencer was a lot about the internal sort of psychological, issues going on in that film. I think this is incredible performances. And I do think, I know Gary likes to bet on the Oscars. I like to talk Oscars a lot, but I think this is a really good contender for, best, like Demi Moore's performance, I think. And it's really amazing.
Yeah, I agree that it's a perfect casting with Demi Moore. And I think, I think she is transformative in it. Again, without saying too much about where the film goes. But I think like it's interesting what you said there about like the lack of subtlety in the film is like clearly a very deliberate artistic choice. Like the way that they repeat these themes and the sort of over-sexualized nature of how Margaret Qualley's filmed versus the kind of the different light that Demi Moore's seen in. I also just want to mention those scenes in the bathroom, like those white tiles. It's so like every fall and every impact with those tiles was just like so well captured that it's just like when they were in that room, I like could barely watch the screen. Like it was very, very well done technically.
I also had this little bit of like under the skin when like, there's like in that black sort of space where they sort of throw Demi or Margaret Qualley when they're not in their body. And it's this kind of, liminal space of your mind. And so I think there was, again, these sort of connections to films that I love and, but yet this filling its own world. And it was and the other thing though, maybe also to mention is it's not necessarily in a certain time. So it's kind of 80s, like it starts with this very Jane Fonda. Some of the cars look sort of like in the 70s or 80s. But then there's like a 90s kind of feel to her apartments. And then, and then she has like a smartphone. So it's very sort of caught in this like LA which has also this sort of feeling of, I don't even like Mulholland Drive as well. There's this just sense of LA-ness of, Hollywood and what, and all that brings with it, and all of its grossness, which I think was its point.
Like takes place in a heightened reality almost, where like everyone is quite exaggerated, and like Dennis Quaid being his character being the kind of epitome of that.
Yeah, named Harvey, so but yeah, so not necessarily for both of you, but maybe definitely top 5. I mean, I really loved this film. I don't know if I would like say over Black Dog, which I liked last month. I really liked Slow as well, but like definitely top 5. I'm really pushing for this. Don't know if I'll see it again though. Don't know if I can handle another set. But also, if you can see it in the cinema, it's like this is one of these films that you like. It's like a ride, and you have to sort of see it with other people. Just see it with other people. That's it, because it's something. Yeah, you might need someone to hold on to. I don't know.
That's fair. Yeah.
All right, so that's The Substance. It's currently out in cinemas right now. Check it out if you, can stomach it, if you dare.
I need to report a crime.
And this was cash?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you describe suspect?
Big guy must weigh 250.
We're gonna hold on to this money.
I didn't get his badge number, but his last name's Marston.
You're gonna need to leave.
Main suspect number 2.
Hey, Mike! I'm posting bail. You stay low, all right?
You can fight for the money, but that'll take you most of a year and cost you twice what you're owed.
And it's legal?
It's the law.
May I at least see my cousin?
You can fuck right
I
off.
would love to, sir, just as soon as I get my money back.
You do not stand in my station in front of my officers and set terms. You need to be very, very careful.
Let's not do that.
Chief!
What are we looking at?
Oh.
I think he's Marine Corps Martial Arts MCMAP. One mind, any weapon.
Whatever you decide to do, you do it damn far from here. You enter this town again, so go another route.
Okay, next film we're going to review is Rebel Ridge, and it's currently out on Netflix, so you can just stay home and watch it if you like. Gary, tell us about this film.
Yeah, so Rebel Ridge is a straight to Netflix release, and it's the latest from the American writer and director Jeremy Saulnier. He's had a bit of a cult following for the past decade or so since he released a film called Blue Ruin, which has like a lot of critical acclaim. It was a bit of a sort of indie darling. And then since then he's made Green Room and Hold the Dark. The plot in this one, it follows an ex-Marine called Terry, played by Aaron Pierre, who's on his way to the police station to post bail for his cousin, who's facing a drugs charge. On his way there, he gets rammed off the road and questioned by a pair of cops who they take his money off him, and they use as because of this illegal process called civil forfeiture. It's a legal process where police can seize the funds of a person if they believe that they're involved in some criminal activity. And in Terry's case, the money is legit. So this is kind of the catalyst for the plot, sets off this chain of events where he's trying to get the money back so he can get his cousin out of jail. And it kind of like takes steam and sets this sort of battle in motion between him and trying to get justice. And he's kind of battling against this corrupt police force, this like small town police force. And I thought it was really great. I'm a big fan of Jeremy Saulnier anyway, and I like that he takes what can be quite a small story and then kind of builds attention, and then has these final acts where things really like explode into action. So this one kind of starts off as a small town conspiracy thriller and then kind of develops into this action revenge movie in its final act. I was a big fan of this, and it's done really well on Netflix. Like everybody was talking about it, and I think it had like over 30 million views in its first week. So yeah, I'm interested to see what did you think about it?
Robert, what do you think?
So I loved Rebel Ridge. This is a movie that kind of is, to put realistically, it is a very honest portrayal of America with the police and the relationship between Black Americans and the police force. And it tackles more about than just that. It tackles it also tackles kind of like how drug addicts as well with the police, and people who are criminals are always criminals. They don't believe in reform, and it's a really haunting portrayal. It's even way just as much as a horror film as the substances. It plays a really bleak portrayal of the police, especially because there's cop media everywhere, right? There's like Law and Order, there's like Chicago PD, there's Blue Bloods, and some of these shows are changing, but Blue Bloods is not, where Blue Bloods will continue to promote the police kind of doing what they want for the sake of justice, and it is the right thing that they're doing. They are bringing safety to their civilians, and Rebel Ridge kind of shows that from the other perspective, and it goes, no, they are bending the rules and they are doing what they want with these rules that are in place to only benefit themselves. It's not to benefit the community. They target people like minorities because they can, and that's kind of like what the film opens with. Is they just say to him, it's like, why are you arresting me? Oh, we have a report of a stolen bike, because they just see him on a bike and like, yeah, there's a stolen bike. And it's quite interesting that they open with Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, which is a great song, but like, you could also read deeper into the lyrics, because that's all about, the devil's number is a human number, is 666, but for a lot of people it could be 911. It could be the police is the devil's number for a lot of people, because that could be a call that could change someone's entire life, because how they're treated depends on their skin color. And it's a haunting portrayal, but it's also a film that, while it does enact revenge on these bad cops, it doesn't, without going into sports, I think it does it in a light that is very, I don't want to say positive, but it's a very, it's a hard word, it's hard to describe it. It's very like, it doesn't say that enacting simple revenge is the right way to do this. It's a much more complicated ending scene that I think is really powerful, especially because for a film that is very violent at times, it also isn't violent, if that makes sense. It could have been a lot worse, and I think he does a good job at painting that simple acts of violence is not the right way to go for this type of revenge. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're all right on sort of, it is quite a thriller. It's a really, like, there are parts of it that I felt were, really impactful and whatnot. But and I think that the main performance of Aaron Pierre was really like stunning, and I think also just like as you said, it's, like, it could be a revenge thing, but his character was always on the right side, I mean, for me, and was never, I don't think he actually ever was killing someone, like that. I don't think he ever, like, so there was these sort of like, and there were sort of cops that, turned good or were on the right side or a bad side, sort of thing. So I think those things were really interesting. To be honest, I guess you guys didn't like Substance. I didn't love this film as much. I didn't really get into it as much, but maybe it's just not my kind of genre as well. I just, like, it was interesting and it kept me like on my seat, but I wasn't loving the film as much as maybe you are.
That's interesting what you say there about the fact that he doesn't actually kill anybody, because he's kind of like pitched as this like big muscular brooding action hero, like a kind of Rambo type, or like maybe John Wick or whatever. But what's interesting in this, even though it's a beat 'em up film as such, it's not a shoot 'em up film. He's a martial arts guy, so like he brings out these guys with his, I think it's like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or somebody might correct me if I'm wrong, but so I think he does it, he's almost like takes a Superman approach where he like does it in a way that he sees fit, and I think he's a really good protagonist, and I think, like you say, his performance is really, really good. I also think, like, I do kind of love a cop thriller, like these depictions of the corrupt cops, and I do think that Don Johnson and Emery Cohen are really despicable in this. And yeah, it's like kind of Jeremy Saulnier's thing where he like has these just horrible villains that they're terrible people, but really interesting to watch. It's kind of been a bit of a theme through his other work. I think it's takes quite a small idea, but then there's larger themes at play around America in itself and racism and the police, and it kind of like uses the story as a bit of a kind of microcosm to explore all those themes. I was a big fan of it.
I am interested that it went straight to Netflix though, and that they didn't take it out to cinemas, because it does seem like a film that would do really well in the cinema, especially because you said it's been quite popular already in, people watching it on, like for the first week.
Yeah, I think it's surprising that it didn't get a cinema release. Jeremy Saulnier is becoming one of these names that like people that love his films really love his films, and it feels like a little bit of a thing. If a film's coming out and I see that he's directing it, then I'm like, I'm definitely going to see it. I wasn't that keen on his previous film. He did one called Hold the Dark.
That wasn't my cup of tea.
Thought that was maybe a little bit of a misstep for him, but I would recommend people to go back and watch Green Room and Blue Ruin. Really, really great films. But yeah, I think, like you say, I think this one would have done really well on the big screen. It feels quite cinematic, and some of its action scenes, like there's this whole like shootout where they're all kind of ducking behind police cars and stuff like that. It was really well done.
Yeah.
It's just I think it's just a wonderful movie at times. It's like, especially in the genre, it's in like the action thriller genre. There's like a lot of movies, especially from my background, the more Asian side of things. You have things like the big Donnie Yen film called Raging Fire. It's a great movie. And then you have the Don Lee Roundup movies. And especially in the Roundup movies, there are moments where, just to be blunt, they will torture people and it's a joke. They're like, oh, can you just wipe the camera? And they punch someone guy to get the info they want. And it's a comedic joke. And you see that a lot where in a lot of action movies, especially with the police, that it's either it's a means to the end that we have to do, or it's a comedic beat to get to the next point. And I'm glad that, especially with films like this, they're going to try and tackle that. There was also a film at TIFF that I saw called The Executioner that's going to handle these cliches and problematic aspects of the police. And it's good that we're seeing films tackle this. And that's one of probably the good things about Netflix. I know people don't like the fact that Netflix can be a dumping ground for movies, but sometimes they do a good job at funding movies that need to get funded, that have actual purpose to them and are very artistically made. I think that they're one of the few platforms that I see take big risks with their movies. Even if they don't necessarily do well, they will take risks with their projects. And sometimes they don't pay out. Sometimes, like I think with this, like Rebel Ridge, it does pay out, and they're gonna get huge viewers, and people are gonna be talking about this movie. And I could definitely see, like, it's not in my top 10 of the year. I could easily see people putting this in the top 10 of the year, because it is I think it's such a surprise film, especially with, I didn't like Hold the Dark that much. I was a bit trepidatious going into this one, and it really kind of blew me away because I was just invested from the beginning, and it's just kept going from the beginning to the end.
I think that's interesting what you say about Netflix. I just feel like they sometimes take that they let directors do whatever they want. And sometimes it might be like a film is lasting too long, or it's but the director then is able to do whatever they want, and it can go either way. So I've seen like really good directors sort of not put on like their Netflix film isn't that great, and they get but in this case, it did do well. And it also people are watching Netflix, and people want to see what's next on this week, so they're pumping out a lot of content, and this was a good one, overall, and people are enjoying it. But yeah, so sometimes it's not. I mean, I was trying to watch the Menendez Brothers or something like that. I don't think that one is as good as this film is.
It's a double-edged sword when you give filmmakers like money and you go make a movie, right? It's like, we see people like Scorsese go and do The Irishman, which for some people love that movie. I haven't necessarily seen it all, but like it's still, they'll give money, they go make a movie, or make a TV show, go and do this, you know, which compared to other studios that are like, make a movie that we want you to make. You must make this movie. You can't deviate from what we want to make, and we might actually say we're going to reshoot the movie where you're not involved in the reshoots and reshoot big chunks of the movie. And I rather have the latter where people are like, with The Substance, like we're taking swings and some of them miss, some of them hit, than making safe movies. I think safe movies are boring in a way. I want to be challenged or watch something that is willing to take risks, and that's just my preference in viewing movies.
Yeah. I see that and I agree. But I also think, like, as producers, producers have this role sometimes, if they're daring producers or indie producers, to challenge the director to make something. Like Jim and I will, who's on the show many times, will famously argue about The Irishman like forever. But I liked the recent Scorsese films. I did not like The Irishman, and I think it was his worst of all the films I've ever seen. And it's Netflix kind of giving him sort of carte blanche to do whatever he wants. I also think, like, I mean, on the documentary side, they're just into, like, you know, crime, and there's not very many, or just famous people, and there's nothing interesting going on there. Sometimes I like to watch just like a series, you know, I mean, I love it, Andy Warhol Diaries or whatever, but I think sometimes it's just back of, they know they want something that will bring in numbers and subscribers, and that's all they care about. And they got it right with this one, but they don't always get it right. So when they're building content, and but they also make a lot of, you know, films now around the world, you know, and are actually doing a lot of productions outside of just like the US. So I think it's interesting to see what works and what doesn't in the Netflix world.
I was born determined. I was good at drinking, having sex, and taking pictures. And I did all three as much as I could. Not everyone can believe this. Surely they can see what he is.
The question is, what are you going to do, Lee Miller?
Europe was at war, and I felt useless. I hear you're the woman to see about a job.
I am.
We don't hire older models.
I'm not a model anymore. I'd rather take a picture than be one.
It's just so creative.
Send me to Europe. I just want to do my part. I'm with Vogue magazine.
There's no women allowed in the press briefing.
You gotta be kidding me.
We don't send women to combat.
Well, that's a problem, because I'm here. Why should the men get to decide? I'm heading to the front.
That's not what I thought you were gonna say.
Ready to go?
The last film we're going to review is Lee, which is a 2020. So Lee was a biographical film about Lee Miller, who was a photographer, well, first model and photographer, and who lived, well, American, but lived in the UK, and a very famous war photographer who captured a lot of the World War II. And there's a great homage in Civil War this year, which we reviewed earlier, to Lee Miller as well. But the film stars Kate Winslet as Lee Miller, and the cast also includes Marianne Cotillard, Andy Samberg, Josh O'Connor, and Alexander Skarsgård. Alexander Skarsgård plays her lover, her partner, Roland Penrose, who is a surrealist painter, and that's sort of where the film starts. So it kind of starts in the second part of her her famous career, where she becomes more of a war photographer and sort of works for Vogue during the beginning of World War II, starts to take pictures of the Blitz, and then eventually goes over to France and captures some really important documentation that we have. The film is based on a book called The Lives of Lee Miller, which was written by Anthony Penrose, her son. And the film sort of captures the life of, it captures her life during this period as her son is learning about this part of her life, because ultimately he found all of her work and kind of brought it back, and now runs the her archive, and sort of helped people understand Lee Miller's fantastic work. Now, I would say that's the gist of the film. And very interesting character. Not sure it was the most interesting film for me. About an interesting person I needed to learn more about. But how about you guys? What did you think of the film?
I'm kind of aligned with you, I think, on it. I didn't really know that much about Dee Miller, but I was aware of her, and then I did pick up on the reference in Civil War, so I kind of knew a little bit about her from that, and then I had read a little bit about her before watching this movie, and I think it's she's clearly an important figure to tell a story about. So I think and I had quite a nice time learning about her throughout the film, and enjoyed the film, but I think what you said earlier, Robert, about Rebel Ridge and other films not playing it safe, I think maybe this one does play it a little bit safe, and it feels quite old-fashioned, feels like the type of film that you would stick on a Sunday night and enjoy, but it didn't really, it was quite old school in the way that it uses the framing device. It was kind of a bit like the Titanic framing device, actually. Kate Winslet, where they have like the old woman regaling her stories from the past, and then this
Good point. Yeah,
you've got a kind of aged up Kate Winslet telling the story of her past, which it's kind of like this old glossy biopic of the type that we don't really see anymore, because I think people are getting a little bit more adventurous with their biopics, with things like Spencer or Jackie, and like that's too by Pablo Larraín, but like this one I feel like plays it a little bit more safe, which is fine. Like, it's funny, I was speaking to somebody about this film as I came out of it, and it sounds like a weird thing to say about a film because it is like actors dressing up, but it feels a little bit like all the actors dress up to put this film on, and it feels a little bit like just, I don't know, you've got Kate Winslet doing the old like 1940s American accent, and then you've got Alexander Skarsgård doing some kind of strange like West Country English accent. I don't know, like it was fun, but a little safe, but a bit like a kind of paint by numbers biopic.
Fair.
A bit harsh, but what did you think, Robert?
So I thought it was okay. It was, like I said, it's paint by numbers. I think if the film was like the last 40 to 50 minutes, it would have been incredible. I think the last 40 to 50 minutes of this movie is where we get the meat and potatoes of this whole movie. It's some of the scenes there are horrifying to see, and it's really powerful. And it did remind me a lot. We bring up Civil War a lot. It kind of tackles similar ideas to Civil War about the dangers they put themselves in to get these photos, and it kind of tackles similar ideas where that's not really the whole movie. It's about our whole life, and I found the beginning part to be like, especially the beginning, like when they're talking about seeing, like, they see footage of what's happening in Germany. It's like, I get where you're like trying to go with this, but like, it just felt long. It felt like it took too long to get to the part that really wants to go into detail about, which is, I think, our photography side of things, and that war photography especially. But it took too long to get there, and then when it starts going, the film kind of just ends, and you're like, oh, it's like, this is a shame, because I think there's an amazing movie in here, and one thing we haven't brought up is, I think, surprisingly, the most shocking performance is Andy Samberg in this movie. I think that, for a lot of people, he's just the funny cop from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but he does a completely serious role in it, which is quite, again, he's really good in the movie. The rest of the cast is really good, but it is mainly Kate Winslet, and I think that she is really great in the movie. But I just wish that we had more of that last 40 minutes for the entire film. I think if it was of that quality, I think that we would be talking about this in a very different light than it's just being, it's all right. Like,
yeah, it's true. This is the first and only like serious role I've ever seen Andy Samberg do. So it's hard sometimes. I think I can go back to what both of you said there, where you have all these really good actors. I mean, Marion Cotillard is an incredible actor. Alexander Skarsgård, incredible actor, and they're not being used like they're like playing costume roles of people who are really famous and really well known and like surrealists, and like, it's really interesting, like cool people, and I didn't get that vibe from this film at all. Like, he's actually a surrealist painter from, you know, the modernist era, and I just didn't like. He seemed kind of just basic, you know, English dude or something, you know. And I just felt like her life seemed really interesting, and it's a really fascinating story, but there's nothing that's like really like keeping you like on, you know, that excited. And also just even the war reenactments and stuff, you know, I like to watch a lot of World War II films, you know. It was just, obviously they don't have the biggest budget. Now, I'll just say that if you look at a little bit of like how this film got made, it took a really long time to make this film. Kate Winslet really backed it. And also, to bring up the director specifically, it's interesting that the director is originally a cinematographer, best known for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And that's how they met, and kind of became fascinated about. So there was this idea about having this kind of film for a long time, and it took a really long time to get the right people on board. And I think perhaps maybe just over time it just like kind of stalled, and the stall sort of turned into the film as well, which is unfortunate because you have the capacity for something like a story like this to be very good. But Paint by Numbers is a good, and it's sort of it's sad. I think we're looking for new ways to put things that are coming out with biopics now are really interesting, and a story about someone like this could have been really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. And I was reading up about Ellen Kuras, and she's a cinematographer. And the cinematographer on this film was best known for The Pianist, the war film with Adrian Brody.
Oh, wow.
And then you look at the guy that does the score, it was like Alexander Desplat, who does lots of amazing scores. So it's like, and the cast is amazing. Huge cast. Josh O'Connor, who's been amazing this year, is kind of wasted a little bit in this as well. We'll see. I forgot to mention Andy Samberg earlier, but he's by far the highlight, I think, in this film. I love Kate Winslet, and I think she does a good job as well. But Andy Samberg for the surprise factor, kind of the latest in a long line of these comic actors that shifts into serious mode and can do a really good job. So I thought his character was interesting. But I think some of those war scenes were well made, and it's like I don't know whether because we've just had Civil War out a few months ago about war journalists, and this one kind of lacked the kind of the immediacy and like the kind of sense of real threat and danger. I think because you are watching it from the guise of this framing device of her telling the story so I think it feels like a little bit of a wasted opportunity because all the pieces are in place to make like a great film, but for some reason it's just a little bit flat.
Well, Civil War has a bit of this, but a little bit of Rebel Ridge, you know, like in it as well. Like, so it's got so much going for it in this way. Like you're like, it's very tense, and this didn't really have that. It didn't have that that feeling. It was just like going back in time, telling old stories, but of a very fascinating story, a really fascinating person. I went back and went to look at all of her photography and, you know, learn more about her. Like, she had a romance with Man Ray, like, you know, in her 20s. I'm like, whoa, like tell that part of the story. But, you know, I mean, whatever.
I think oh, you go, Gary.
I was just going to say, I think there is there could have potentially been a better film in there, and then maybe it has been these production issues. I know that a couple of people came in and dropped out, and then Kate Winslet injured her back during production, and then that kind of caused a delay. I'd read that Jude Law was supposed to be playing previously and got recast. I feel like he would have been a better fit than Alexander Skarsgård, but and Andrea Riseborough, who we've not mentioned, is in it, who can be really great when she's great. And again, in this, it's just like she's there, but part of the ensemble that's a little, they're just not firing on all cylinders at all.
No.
Yeah, it's like, for me, controversially, the best bit of the movie is actually Googling the real story and Googling the actual photographs that she took. And it sounds kind of like petty, but it's like when they do like a comparison of her pictures, and it's like, you didn't kind of nail the picture. It's like really weird how it doesn't look identical. It's like, And that might be really petty, but it's like, it just shows like a lack of polish that like, you know, these are meant to be like like this is the actual photo moment, and it's like they don't look the same. It's like, and it loses the impact when they don't look the same. And like you talk about this genericness, it's like, or like the paint by numbers approach, even the title's like, really, it's Lee. Like there has to be a better title than just Lee, like for this movie. And you know, and
I agree with you. This whole like, let's follow around where let's take you to the scene of that exact spot where like she took that photo. I mean, that was like, that felt like the whole film, you know, like we are following around. Oh, right. This was the backstory of this photo. And I just didn't think I needed that every scene. Like it just plodded along, you know? So too bad. And it's on Sky. It's a Sky movie. It's out in cinemas now, but it'll be on Sky. And it feels like a Sky movie, like a movie you may see on TV about a famous photographer. So, you know, that's unfortunately the way it is.
Yeah, and sadly, probably the best way to probably watch it is on Sky. Or like if it's on and like you want a couple hours to kill, I think it's actually worth the watch. But like,
yeah,
I wouldn't like rush to the cinema to see it. It's like it's good like afternoon entertainment. You're like, you got nothing to do. It's a miserable Saturday. Just whack it on. Like you're not gonna, I don't think, regret watching it.
No, but it's no substance.
Yeah, it doesn't take any big swings.
All right, so that's Lee. And yes, check it out on Sky if you want to. Okay, and we're back, and I'm here with Marion, who is the director of the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival, which is happening from the 2nd to the 26th of October next month, in its 11th year. Marion, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amanda.
Great.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, tell me a little bit about the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival. I've been here 7 years, and I know it's been running for a long time, and it's been something I've really enjoyed over the years. But tell us a little bit about the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival.
Well, the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival started 11 years ago, and I've been running the festival since then. It's been always in October, which is the month for the festival.
Yeah.
And it's been, pretty much from the beginning of October. So it's very kind of settled in the history of festivals in Edinburgh, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. So where sort of moved around, obviously for specific reasons, but now the film festival is not just in Edinburgh; it goes on tour as well. So tell us a little bit about the venues of the festival this year. So you're at the French Institute again as well in Edinburgh.
Yes, we are in Edinburgh at the French Institute, at the Omni, and also the Odeon Cinema.
Oh, okay.
Of course, we miss the Film House. And also we are in Stirling and Glasgow, and we've been in Stirling and Glasgow for a number of years, just for maybe 2 or 3 screenings. And last year was the first time that we went to Inverness. And this year also we have Trinent in East Lothian.
Okay, great, wonderful. So how have you felt that the expansion has sort of helped people see Spanish film or your films in general? Has it been a good experience for you?
Yes, it's been a great experience. I mean, I have to say that they approach me rather than me approaching them. I think there is an interest for Spanish film. And they are very happy to keep trying for 1 or 2 screenings, which is wonderful.
Well, so having done this for 11 years, what is sort of your take on finding the right films for Edinburgh audiences, the Spanish films that there's so many, I'm sure, every year that come out. So how do you sort of go about curating and finding the right films?
Well, I mean, what is the right film? I'm not sure about that. I mean, sometimes I watch a film and I think, this is great. This is great for this audience. And sometimes I'm not sure. It's not maybe my cup of tea, but I think maybe there's an audience for that film. So I try to, to get the opinion of other people as well to see what do you think. Mm-hmm. So it's like a group effort. Yeah, absolutely. What's exciting and happening? What's one of your favorite films that are a part of the festival this year? Well, I mean, I cannot have a favorite. No. I cannot choose one. I think this year we are going for real stories and every life stories. Mm-hmm. And there are quite a lot of films about families and relationships in the families. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested in relationships, complex relationships, how people argue or how people get on together. And this is what it's about. We have quite a lot of films, we have Little Loves, The Quiet Maid, and The Therapy, Campionex. So they are, families or couples trying to find their way to survive, to have a good time, to get on with life. Mm-hmm. And I have to say we have to say that they are wonderfully dysfunctional, because in a way dysfunctional sounds negative, but I think it could be also positive if you put the adjective of wonderfully dysfunctional, because they are not typical families. Yeah, absolutely. So you have also lots of filmmakers sort of in attendance, or they're going to be remotely there as well. Tell us a little bit about your special guests and sort of activity that's going on around with the festival. Yes, I'm very proud to say that we have 6 guests coming from Spain to Edinburgh. So this is wonderful. And one guest who is Ithia Boyain, who lives here, and she will be also with us presenting her last film. It's great. I mean, sometimes 2 of these filmmakers present their first film, so they are quite excited. Yeah. And they say they are delighted. So this is what you want to hear from a guest, and I'm sure it will be great. Yeah, absolutely. And also, it really matters when they're in person and they're here. It's great that we can do that again. There was a few years where we couldn't. But bringing the filmmaker is such an important part of the festival experience. Yes, of course, because this is what people expect in a festival, to have not only to watch a film, to share the experience, and with the filmmaker. I think the Q&As are always successful. And this year for the opening, the director is coming, Simon Casal. So we are offering a glass of wine to anyone who joins us for the opening, and they will have the opportunity to talk to him, because sometimes, the film finish, the Q&A finish, and then maybe you want to spend a little bit of time talking to the director. So I hope a lot of people can join us. We love that as well, because that's a Cinetopia thing. We just think there needs to be space for discussion, or sort of informal discussion as well. So, and I love wine, so I see that you have a couple events related to wine. I love Spanish wine as well, so. Well, I think, yes, we love wine, and wine will be followed by tapas as well. So it's a great experience, but it's not only because of the wine, it's when people get together, is when people socialize, and I think this is so important in a festival. It's not just the film; it's just to create this kind of community engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of wine, though, but you do have a wine tasting event, right?
Yes, we do.
Friday, the October 4th, correct? Yeah, with who?
Is a bodega coming from Spain called Alvear, and they are bringing their wonderful wines, and then one or two restaurants here, they are going to produce the tapas. So
amazing! Sounds very good. I'll be there for sure. Anything else to highlight, like certain films that you want to sort of share with our audiences?
Well, I think also apart from the opening film is quite interesting because it's a thriller, and it's a thriller that it was set in Galicia, which is very kind of the west part of Spain, and the atmosphere is quite intimidated in a way, and it's talking about something that it looks like is the future, but actually is a very close future, and it's the artificial intelligence. So how it's gonna affect our lives?
Yeah, and I find those to be some of the scariest films lately. We did talks about documentaries talking about AI and stuff. So so that's very interesting because that's called Artificial Justice, right? That's the
and it's
film.
Talking about the justice. Do we really want that? Well, it doesn't matter because I think it's there. Yeah. So, and also we have a Latin American window. We have 2 Latin American films, one Peruvian, one Argentinian, and we have also a co-production called The Blue Star, and it's a debut film as well. And it's one of the films chosen for the Oscars, to be presented for the Spanish films at the Oscars. So it's a really, really nice film.
Great. Wonderful.
And then we have a documentary as well. Called Soy Rebelde, or I'm a Rebel, about a British singer called Janet. I don't know if you heard of her. She's now in her 70s, and she has been an icon for Spanish people in the 70s, 80s, and she is still singing. Wow. So it's a documentary through her life and how, Spanish life has changed through the years. It's very interesting as well.
Great.
And I'm bringing this documentary because I heard on a radio podcast, the director of the film saying how difficult it has been to create this documentary. Yeah. And anyway, I thought, well, I must bring in, because someone who has put so much effort in it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's always amazing to see how long documentaries take to get funded to be made and all that sort of stuff. So it's so nice when they're quality and you love, and the stories are wonderful, and that sounds like a great film.
And just to finish, there are a couple of films based on 2 true stories, completely different. One is a terrible story in the 80s. So Spanish was not in a dictatorship. And it was about this horrible place, almost like a prison, where girls who got pregnant when they were teenagers or before they were 18 were taken there. And what happened? So it's a really dreadful story. And then the last one, and it's our last film, is the film by Iciar Boyain called I Nevenka. The film is going now to San Sebastian Film Festival. It's been chosen for that, and then it's going to London.
Great.
and then it's coming here. This is why it's our last film.
Nice. Yes.
On the 25th and 26th of October.
Great.
And it's a film about the first Me Too that happened in Spain at the beginning of the century. It was the first woman who took to court a politician. So it's fiction, but it's based on a true story as well.
Great. I mean, it looks, also, if anyone can find your program around town, pick it up. It's really beautiful, and it's just so colorful as well. So just like your film sound and whatnot. Thank you so much for taking the time. Does anything else? I actually just want to ask you a question, because you've done this for 11 years. Why do you love doing the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival, and why is it something that you think is important?
I think, why do I love it? I'm not loving all the time, but I think this, I love when it happened, and I think it's also a sense of responsibility in a way. Mm-hmm. So 1 year takes to another year, but it's always very challenging. So you never know what is going to happen next year, and it's no security of, as you know, of getting the funding or even to have a team, because, people comes and goes, and so it is difficult and challenging.
I feel that, and especially having run a lot of outdoor events, which have these extra precarity of rain and thunder or whatnot. It's sometimes you wonder why it's so much hard work. It's a lot of thankless energy and time. But then once you're there in the moment, you're like, and afterwards you feel the energy and of the audience, and appreciate that and we really appreciate that you have been around for this long and doing this. So I totally know what you mean. But yeah, so the Edinburgh Spanish Film Festival is on from the 2nd to the 26th of October. Please check it out in the city that you're in.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you, Marion. All right. So I'm back, and I'm here with the curators of the Samizdat Film Festival. I'm here with Harriet Idle, director curator, and Elia Rozhenko, curator. How are you guys today?
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, doing great. Thank you very much.
So tell me a little bit about your festival. I believe it started in 2022. What was the ideation around the whole festival and bringing these films and having a festival dedicated to Eastern European cinema in Scotland?
I think, several of us have lived in Glasgow and in Scotland for a number of years. And we would go to the cinema a lot. We would go to various cultural events. And I think in general, it just came from a place of recognition of a lack of meaningful events that had to do with, the representation of Eastern Europe in this broader sense. Eastern European films would obviously go to cinemas every now and again, and sometimes they would do well, and sometimes they would attract a crowd. But considering just how many people who live in Scotland are of Eastern European descent or origin, or who have immigrated during their lifetime from Eastern Europe, it felt very strange that no specific kind of cultural community events were targeted at them and offered to them.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about the name of the film festival, sort of what what that evokes and it's the inspiration behind it?
Well, I think I can answer that one because I speak Russian, and the name comes from the Russian word samizdat, which translates to literally translates to self-publication or self-publishing, and refers to the process by which, in countries where kind of publishing of literature and of pamphlets and theory was regulated, samizdat was a way in which a person who obtained a copy of a book that was censored or forbidden from abroad could manually handwrite it or type it somewhere on a stack of A4 papers and distribute it kind of in a clandestine way through the underground network where it would be replicated and copied. And I think the idea was that we were interested in this kind of the undergrounder side of cinema and the film exhibition, a way for us to kind of bring in things from abroad and also to distribute them in ways that are less kind of apparent and less available to the industry. So focus on kind of a very independent, overlooked cinema.
And what I really love about your program, it's just it brings sort of, new submissions mixed with sort of old retrospective stuff you would never necessarily, that you've unearthed and and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about, your vision around the curation.
I'll start. So my approach, our team kind of comes from all different places. A lot of us met kind of doing our master's degree in Glasgow. So we all come from a lot of us come from a kind of film scholarship background. But we all have very kind of like different interests, different kind of contexts, and kind of just different approaches to curation as well, which makes for a kind of really interesting kind of blend. For me personally, I am sort of interested in a lot of genre cinema. That's kind of my area of interest. That's the things I love to watch. And also I think it's a really important balance, especially when it comes to curating a festival. Oftentimes there is a kind of bias towards these kind of darker or like dramas, a lot of kind of heavy subject matter, which of course I think is very necessary and urgent as well. But my approach has always been to show a lot of the kind of more popular films that come from these regions as well, the things that people from these regions were watching and enjoying at home or watching in the theaters. So that was kind of the impetus as well behind curating the horror strand that we have this year as well. Just kind of bringing a lot more kind of like dynamicism, I guess, to the program, and sort of bringing things that may sort of expand people's ideas of what genre it is as well from these different places.
Yeah, I would add also that, when it comes to a curated festival, and our festival is mainly a curated festival, so we don't receive feature film submissions. We receive submissions for the short film competition, but the festival is otherwise just kind of, we are the source of these picks rather than the kind of recipients of them. I think maybe this will change eventually, but for now we kind of do the work entirely ourselves. But I think, we share this focus with different curators, and some of them focus on specific geographic regions, some of them focus on specific topics. So for instance, there will be a curator who will specifically in the beginning of the year seek out to find a particular film for a particular genre or a particular program. So a lot of the times it comes with a kind of preconceived notion of what you're going to look for. And then the process takes you kind of wherever. We don't restrict ourselves in terms of time period specifically, because you asked about classics and retrospective. So, for instance, this year I was curating the Central Asian program, so kind of the wider post-socialist space, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and I think that there's such a big break in terms of film aesthetics that came in the 90s. But Kazakh film, and Uzbek film, I think from the 70s until the late 90s, was just a completely different kind of its own genre, its own new wave. And I think to me, I just immediately understood that that's where I was going for, what I was going for this year. There's already plenty of festivals that will show you the newest, releases with the highest production value and the kind of the conventions. And I think exactly what Hattie mentioned, I think sometimes this kind of overwhelming focus on the most recent, highest production value, highest, quote unquote quality films from countries that don't have a lot of film production, I think a lot of that yields and kind of homogenizing the look of these films. They end up looking similar, they end up sounding quite similar. So if we're trying to kind of diversify this and really kind of follow the tradition of samizdat, of kind of doing it ourselves a little bit, then it makes more sense to just completely disconnect from looking just a specific time period.
Great. And you mentioned specifically, your horror strand, is it Night Terrors? What? Tell me a little bit about that program, and also, we'll go into maybe some other highlights of the festival.
Yeah. So, as I briefly mentioned, it kind of came from my general approach to curating this festival as a whole. The last couple of years, I've kind of been delving a lot more into kind of genre cinema, or like how films from these regions kind of take on genre differently. And that really could just kind of pique my interest. I knew, especially since the film takes place in October, I just kind of had this sort of feeling of like fate that you could do something, really kind of like atmospheric and spooky in October. Something that really appeals to people in this kind of time of year, but then also sort of bring something fresh to the horror genre as well, by sort of displaying some of these like lesser known films, or kind of more sort of like these hidden gems from Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the Caucasus. So that's kind of where like the seed came from. It was a really interesting experience for me as someone who's like a complete scaredy cat, and just finds it like horror in general is something that I sort of have a love-hate relationship with. But it was really good fun. It was myself and my colleague Joe who curated the strand together. And I think we just put together a lot of very kind of like interesting things in conversation with each other. We have a kind of found footage style film called Be My Cat, which I think is really kind of funny and dark. And then we also have some of these kind of more artistic, like sort of beautiful, surreal films, like Hourglass Sanatorium as well. So I think it's a really kind of fun, playful, and just like, a really sort of, great program of things. I'm really excited for it this year.
Yeah, I love that you said, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I didn't work on the program, but as soon as the decision was made to kind of go and create a program of Night Terrors, I just knew it would be exciting, partly because the tradition of horror in Eastern Europe is completely different. It doesn't stem from slasher films, and it doesn't stem as much from kind of the vampire story as it would be kind of for some of the Western or Western European cinema. It stems a lot from folk tales. It stems a lot from surrealism, and later on in the second half of the 20th century, it has a lot of sci-fi influences from, a lot of Polish, Czech, Russian sci-fi writers and so on. And I think a lot of them, they have this like very rich kind of folk connection. So I just knew it would be just a completely different kind of thing. And alongside the films that Hattie mentioned, there's also the absolutely amazing Czech film, The Cremator. That's going to be the closing film of the festival that was curated by Joe. And also a Serbian film called Have You Seen This Woman? That's more like an experimental kind of Gaspar Noé type of almost like a trip, very kind of disturbing multi-narrative film that I think plays into the idea that there's not so many Eastern European films that are strictly horror in the sense that we are kind of used to. A lot of the times they're much more kind of artful and kind of penetrating and kind of oppressive in their atmosphere rather than directly terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. I would say your love-hate relationship with horror is sort of in similar to me. I'm petrified of scary things, but I love the experience of horror film festivals and sort of that community of watching something and also thinking about that genre and how it grows out. So it's really fascinating. So tell me a little bit about your opening film program. I believe it kicks off, or at least on the 1st of October, animations of the late Eastern Bloc. That sounds really fascinating as well.
I guess I can speak to this in a little bit because I threw in a couple picks there myself into that program. But basically, that stems from that program is the baby of another curator, Andrew, who has programmed something similar last year, and that was actually the program that we did a rerun in the summer hall of with Manipulate Arts. This year, the program is specifically focused on the 80s and 90s. That's partly because we were interested in this kind of in the late stages of this of the development of Eastern European and kind of post-Soviet animation, partly because animation was always such a kind of a space for radical experimentation, because as we all know, animation is, of course, quote unquote, just for kids. And I think in many ways, the censors thought that it was a kind of a benign, a negligible space for political expression. They didn't really put as much kind of censor effort into it as some of the other areas. And then some of the countries that would have regimes that were a bit more opened, despite kind of like being totalitarian to some extent, I think they would encourage animation and experimentation in animation because it would rack up rewards and prizes at competitions abroad, and it would bring money to the film industry. So we're trying to kind of figure out, what was the final act of this strange moment where these very closed and tightly controlled film industries still happen to produce some of the most kind of visually stimulating, bizarre, and radically charged films of the 20th century, really. So a lot of the films that you will see are kind of in dialogue or directly reflecting or directly satirizing kind of communist governments that have existed throughout Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia during that time. But in terms of aesthetics, the program is primarily focused on the traditional animation, hand-drawn stuff or puppet animations, a lot of stop-motion stuff as well. It follows, I think, directly from last year's Surrealist animation program, but this time it has this sharper edge. I'm really excited to show it as well. It will have an introduction by Mikhaila Pavlatova, who is one of the directors whose film is featured in the program herself, and she will give a kind of a 10-minute intro into how this worked during that time, kind of her own personal anecdotes as a woman animator working in the industry in the 1980s, Czech Republic.
Great. And I was going to ask, because I'm learning a lot right now just by talking about the program, but how much sort of introductions or Q&As are you going to sort of bring in terms of sort of placing these films and for your audience to know a little bit more about the history, or is that something as part of your plans or curation?
Yeah, we always try and do at least some form of introduction, give some kind of context. Again, because we're trying to not only connect with Eastern European diasporic communities in Glasgow, but also introduce people, cinephiles from all backgrounds to these films. So we want to kind of treat it as if, people are coming completely fresh. And sometimes like a couple of these films, a lot of them are incredibly kind of intuitive to kind of get to grips with, but some can be kind of jarring or new experiences for people. So we tend to have some kind of introduction or Q&A involved in the screening, and if there isn't, one of our curators will provide kind of like a short introduction for the films that they've curated as well. This year we've got a couple of introductions from film scholars. We have some of the directors of the films, some of the filmmakers giving introductions as well. So we've got an interesting kind of mix of people giving context to the films.
Yeah, it's kind of like we recognize that a lot of these films have a historical context, a political context that's not necessary to understand them, but it's always helpful. And I think in most ways it's just enriching. You're just in a much more productive conversation with the film if you know at least what's sort of happening, even if it's a film that's seemingly divorced from whatever's happening in the country at that particular time. It never really is, especially in Eastern Europe, because there's so much going on all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I always love an introduction as much as I love like a post discussion, because I really think it frames the experience really effectively. And I'm always also wanting to learn more. Usually, if I love the films, then I'm wanting to learn more, and then we'll go online and try to figure it all out. I wanted to jump quickly back to your short, since you mentioned obviously a lot of curation that's gone into the whole program, but you have a short film competition and you do have submissions for that. And I also sort of read, it's about over 1,000 submissions. That's quite a large amount, and culling it down to 17. So tell me a little bit about what we should expect about those 17, but perhaps how you came to those.
I think neither me nor Hattie are the people who can speak about it best, because we weren't part of the kind of the short film selection committee. But kind of the inside scoop is that the idea was to open up the submission process as much as possible, really to allow everyone to submit films, have no submission fees, advertise it to film schools, to people all the way across kind of Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the Caucasus. And that's why quite a lot of submissions came in. I think the short film competition, I mean, it really serves, first of all, as a way to uplift a lot of the filmmakers from the region, because, even though we do not position ourselves at all as a kind of a festival that's concerned with prestige or red carpets and any of that stuff, because we're very kind of audience focused, I think still for a filmmaker from abroad sometimes, and the ability to kind of confirm that their film speaks to an audience in a different cultural context is a really good way to kind of to prove it to the local film industry or the film industry abroad that their films tackle these concerns that are interesting, intriguing to others as well. So I think it's a very important kind of component of the festival on a conceptual level as well. In terms of the specifics of the program, the films this year are a real sort of mix. There are films that are very kind of there are films that are skits. A couple of them were made for 48-hour challenges. There are longer documentaries there, something just under 20 minutes. For instance, one of the documentaries that I've seen comes from Kyrgyzstan, and talks about the Roma community living in Central Asia at the moment. So it's a kind of like an ethnographic documentary with a focus on human rights. There are several films from Ukraine. One of them is a kind of a darker rom-com. Another one is very much a very kind of a very heavy political picture. Another one is a completely experimental, poetic film. So it's a real proper mix. Purposefully so, and the audience will be allowed to vote for the picture that they consider to be the best one, and will come with a small prize, and hopefully we can promote the film a little bit more.
So it's happening start of October. Tell me a little bit about the venues, and anything else you want to mention specifically in terms of your program that you want to push and highlight.
So the program is taking place across a couple of different venues. So we have the opening night is taking place, the animation screening is taking place in the Glasgow Film Theatre in central Glasgow, and then we'll have screenings at the Centre for Contemporary Arts in Glasgow, and a couple of screenings from the Horror Strand will play at Glasgow Film Theatre as well. And then we have kind of accompanying screenings in Edinburgh Summer Hall as well.
Yeah, and I guess just to wrap it up in terms of an important point about the program is that we're really kind of committed to making the program accessible for everyone. Just wanted to draw attention to the fact that we have pay what you can sliding scale ticketing for most of our picks, and for picks that are at at the partnered venues that have a fixed price. We also allow our audiences to apply for a very simple kind of audience access fund, especially if they receive benefits or have a refugee status or a refugee background. They could have the cost of their ticket or childcare or commute subsidized. So we really hope to be able to see everyone there.
Wonderful. So the festival is happening from the 1st to the 5th of October, and tickets are on sale now, correct? So they can go to your website.
That's right. And tickets for the, by the time this podcast is out, the tickets for the Edinburgh Summer Hall pop-up event on the 19th of October will be available as well.
Okay, well, wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat about your festival with me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
All right, so that is our show this month, and a big thank you to Gary and Robert for joining. There's a lot of things coming up soon, so any things for us to sort of look out for that we should tell our audience?
I would say I'm going to see The Outrun. We spoke about it on last month's show, but that's getting a cinema release at the end of September. So I'd recommend seeing that. And if you want, my interview with the cast and director is on cinemaperspective.com if you want to read about that.
Great.
What about you, Robert?
So in terms of October, the film that should be on everyone's list is The Wild Robot, the new DreamWorks movie. It is, I'll say the M word, it is a masterpiece from them. It is one of their best movies they've ever made. So people should go and check it out. It's incredible. Also, if you like your very violent Netflix action movies, The Shadow Strays by Timo Tjahjanto is coming out in October, I believe. That movie is also amazing for completely different reasons. It is a very brutal female-centric action movie, and it's a good time. I also got to speak to him. He's a very interesting man in the best way possible. Just absolutely crazy.
And you're heading to London Film Festival as well, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's gonna be a busy few months. Yeah, so it's just a lot. Like TIFF was a lot, and now London. Hopefully, get to see some cool movies there. So yeah, it's just really hectic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Blitz. I'm not going to London Festival, but I'll be eagerly waiting for that. I think it's out in November. The new Steve McQueen movie. So yeah.
I think the film for London that I'm looking forward to the most is quite weird. It's the new Naruko Yamada movie, The Colors Within. She is a very amazing anime director. Directed a film called The Silent Voice that's also incredible. So her new movie is in London. Hopefully we'll get to see that. And because especially with anime, we need to promote female voices in anime. There's not many female directors, and she's one of the bigger names in it, so it's important to promote that sort of stuff where possible.
All right. Well, we'll see you both soon, if it's not next month, in the future, and around, at festivals and cinemas around us. So thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.